Woke up this morning with my mind set on loving me. With my mind
Welcome to the Q&A exchange.
I'm your host and self-healing coach, Kuyani Denise.
And my name is April Diane, self-care coach. And today we are coming to you to talk about the topic of setting boundaries. And as you can see, we have a special guest with us today. Her name is Dr. Fazida Abdur Rahman. Is that correct?
Correct.
Awesome. Dr. Fazida is the founder and owner of Vibrant Women's Wellness Counseling. And we showed a clip of her last week sharing with us all the importance of showing up for ourselves. And so here we just wanted to bring her on and share some more ideas from her professional experience with working with others on the topic of setting boundaries. Due to her love, and I'm going to read her bio here for you, her love for women's health and the belief that mental, physical, and spiritual health factors should be incorporated into treatment provided to women, she began VWWC to foster professionals of varying backgrounds to work together to provide holistic care. I love that so much. So definitely go ahead and check her out on Instagram, Vibrant Women's Wellness Counseling. We shared hers last week, her Instagram handle, and you'll see it also at the end of this video. So welcome, Dr. Fazida. We're glad to have you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Awesome. So I want to start off today by asking you a very simple question. How is the practice of setting boundaries connected with mastering self-care?
Okay, great question. When I think of your question, I think of a couple of different things. But first, I think self-care and boundaries really are interrelated. Setting boundaries is important, and it's something that is necessary for our mental and emotional, and maybe even our spiritual and physical care. Because I'm someone that emphasizes wellness, I think of self-care along the lines of wellness. And in my work with women, as well as the other staff at VWWC, we take a holistic approach. So mental, physical, and spiritual health. And I think self-care is important to achieve health in those different types of areas. So, boundaries definitely comes up along with self-care, because if we want to be well, we have to put some parameters around ourselves, our time, and that may impact, of course, on our relationships, with others. So I think of the interconnection, but you also asked about mastery of self-care, which is, a big theme in itself. I don't know anyone specifically who is perfectly, have learned to master self-care. But I think most of us were on a journey, and some of us are maybe a little further along than others in terms of setting up whatever boundaries we need to help us to achieve that self-care. But I think for the people who are a little better at mastering self-care, what's included in that is, just kind of being honest with ourselves, honest with other people, and honest in terms of our limitations. What can we do? What can't we do? And thinking about what we can do before we actually commit. So it doesn't mean that we necessarily have to be rigid, that, once someone asks us something, our answer is no, I can't. But it means that we need to be honest, and also, have some flexibility, because if we do want to have relationships with other people in our lives, we have to bend a little bit. We have to give and receive. So I think it's really a combination of those different things, taking care of our well-being and seeing our well-being as important enough to put in place the different things that we need so that we can be well in those, various areas of our lives, but being able to set limitations as needed when things come up.
Awesome. Two key things that you said that seem so simple. Being honest, that's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
What is so this is definitely, to me, at the heart of why do we even have to say be honest, right? Like, shouldn't that even be a given? The reason that we have to say that, there's some fear around honesty. And how is that fear connected to setting boundaries? Like, for example, if someone asks me to do something and I really don't have the time to do it, but I value that relationship, right? So I say yes, just to make sure, that I stay in good standing with that relationship. There's a fear, I guess, that's coming up there for me that's causing me not to want to say no.
Mm-hmm.
Is that accurate, would you say?
Definitely. Fear is at the heart of a lot of different challenges that we all, have. I think sometimes when it's a question of saying no when you really need to, but you're afraid of saying no, oftentimes it's, fear of rejection. We all want approval and acceptance, especially for people that we love and care for, about. For some people, if you have had a lot of life experiences of rejection, you don't want to experience that again. So saying no, it might seem like a small thing for some people, but for others, it's a huge task, because if I dare say no, what will that mean? What will happen in that relationship, especially if that's the only real close relationship that I have? What's going to happen? And the fear, of course, is I'm going to lose that person. I'm going to lose that relationship. And that's not something I can deal with. So I'm going to say yes, even though I know that I shouldn't, and I know that I can't really manage it well. I'll be exhausted. I have, several other things to do, but I need that approval. I need that acceptance of this person that I care about. So I don't want to be disappointed. I don't want to be rejected. Maybe I'm afraid of conflict. I don't like for things to get very intense. So I just want to keep the peace. I'll go along to get along, because it's easier to do it that way rather than, to say how I really feel.
A question. For the sake of people not really knowing, how does a person identify that they don't have boundaries? Because we've established that a lot of times we don't, because we're afraid of the rejection. We're afraid of disappointing the person. We're afraid of losing a relationship. A lot of people don't recognize that as not having boundaries. That word, when I first heard it used in the context of relationships, was maybe 10, 12 years ago, when a friend had recommended that my now ex-husband read this book called Boundaries in Marriage. And of course, we got the books and I was the only one reading it. And at some point I abandoned it, because I'm like, well, if I'm the only one reading the book and he's not participating, it makes no sense. I should have kept reading it. But that was the first time that I heard of it in the context of relationships. I'm like, okay, so a boundary boundaries are necessary. But how do people recognize that that's what's missing in these lopsided, I want to say lopsided relationships where a lot is going on that is hurting one person maybe, and the other person is taking them for granted. How do they identify that there's a lack of boundaries and that's why this is continuing?
Well, you ask a question that it's not really a simple answer. The shortest I can make it really is, if you think of a lot of other examples, sometimes, we might not be aware of our actions and things that we're doing until, we have this epiphany. Someone might say, hey, what are you doing? Why are you choosing to do this? Or we might come across, a book, we watch a TV program. Sometimes I think we recognize that something is not right, but we just might not know what exactly is not right. So we might need a little help getting that insight. I think definitely with certain families, we have this term called enmeshment. Especially if you consider culturally, there are different dynamics within families and certain types of families in particular, where the expectations are, you're the child, we're the parent, you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z. We're supposed to know all of your business. You're the sibling, you're the older sibling, we're the younger ones. You're supposed to do X, Y, and Z. So there's all these, unwritten rules and expectations. And a lot of times, the women that we work with at VWWC, they're not aware of these different dynamics and, how it's affecting them. They'll come and they'll say, well, I'm just really stressed out. I'm burnt out. I'm tired of X, Y, and Z. This person is calling. They're asking for this. I have this other person. So they're not thinking of it in terms of, perhaps there's a boundary line that has been crossed. It's just kind of, this is my norm. This is what we do. This is how we function. So they need a little bit of insight and education around, what are different types of family dynamics, and I wouldn't use the word necessarily normal, because there really isn't a normal. There's some variations on, what goes on, but we talk about different dynamics and how it's impacting on the person. So for the person who comes from a family where there's a lot of enmeshment, there's a lot of blurring of the lines, but there's not a negative impact on that person, then we say, hey, it works for you. But for the person or the people where they are not doing well mentally, and now it's seeping into their physical health or even their spiritual well-being, then there's a problem. And then we have to kind of explore, what's going on, and are you okay with what's going on? And if you're not okay with what's going on, what would you prefer things to be? And then we start to think through, how do we help you to get to where you prefer things to be? So it can get very complex. And I mentioned, certain types of family dynamics, but certainly, in romantic relationships, especially where there's some emotional, verbal, or even, physical abuse, there's a lot of blurring of lines. And so each situation kind of needs its own remedy, sort of to say. But I think, we can learn, definitely. It takes awareness to kind of see this is what's going on. And then from there you can decide, well, what do I want to do now that I've learned that these dynamics are, at play.
Wow, the unwritten rules and expectations. Yeah, those are, I love that term, enmeshment. I'm not familiar with that. It sounds like you summed it up as a blurring of the lines. Would you say that that's kind of what it how you define it?
Yeah, definitely. Enmeshment,
Spell it for me.
yes, ENMESHMENT.
Okay.
So I think of it definitely as the blurring of the lines. There is no boundary line in dynamics like that. It's just kind of like we're all one, and that one oftentimes is very unhealthy. Again, I think mostly of parent-child dynamics, adult children, where their parents are just, all involved in their business, and vice versa. The child can be the parent to the parent, and so they have roles that they really shouldn't be carrying as the child.
But I like what you said, though, that, everyone's boundaries are different. Everyone's formula is different, and how you said that for some people, it may be perfectly fine. They may be doing well, and there may be some blurring of the lines in some aspects of it. But then that person also feels safe enough to say, okay, I usually do this, but not today. Try me tomorrow. So it can be a temporary boundary also, right? It doesn't have to be a permanent boundary, but just the room and the space to be able to say no when you need to say no for yourself. Yeah, wouldn't you say that would help you to identify if someone really had your best interest in mind, if they allowed you and they felt they were making room in the connection with you to let you set your boundary, to embrace when you do set the boundary? Would you say that would be a good indication for someone who is pursuing a romantic relationship to determine whether or not the romantic relationship should continue to go further, if they are able and feel comfortable enough to say no when they need to say no? Would that be a good indicator as to being a good foundation of a relationship?
I think so. I think what we're talking about or alluding to is really what we call sense of self. If we have a good sense of who we are, and how we show up in the world, it helps us to be more confident and to say no when we actually need to say no. If we are uncertain of who we are, uncertain of what we want, uncertain of our value and our worth, it just makes it that much easier to go along with, whomever it is that's giving us some attention. So I think it is definitely related to self-esteem, and the beliefs that we have about ourselves and others, as well as our beliefs about the world and how they're going to receive us.
Okay, so sense of self, that's really good right there. Sense of self, we're talking about our values, I guess, things that are important to us, our interests, perhaps.
Yeah. Our desires, our identity.
Identity.
What do we, how do we see ourselves? How do we define ourselves? Our interests, what do we want? What are we hoping for? It's anything relating to the self that we want to give definition to.
Okay, and then determining if the person, what they're asking of us, fits into that, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that using that as some sort of a measurement for determining when and how we set the boundaries, because that's important too, like understanding how to set boundaries, because you talked about flexibility also, right? If you want to have healthy relationships, you have to have that flexibility, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think a lot of times for single women, I hear a lot of times who, they're dating, they want attention from a man, and depending on how needy they are, they may be willing to, lower the bar, whatever they might have had. If they had a bar, they're willing to lower that bar. So when I think of sense of self, it's irrespective and independent of another. So first it's, kind of knowing who you are, figuring out what you want. And then if there's another involved, then you're evaluating, does this person fit in line with what it is that I want for myself. That person doesn't have to be the helper or the determiner of what it is that you want, what boundary you need. It's first you're kind of establishing that within your own self, and you're going to evaluate, your interactions with this person. And if this person, is seeming as though, yes, he fits with what I want for myself. Okay, this looks like this can work for me. Or no, I see, no, he's not in line with what it is that I'm wanting for myself. Then, okay, I have to determine what if any boundary is it that I'm going to need to establish in that interaction or dynamic.
Understood.
It's just, yeah, I'm sorry. It's just making me think how many of us come into relationships, whether they're romantic or not, with actual sense of self, knowing what we want besides wanting the affection and the company. What are we willing to exchange for that attention and that company? Or if we are willing to exchange things, like how many of us really know? I don't like, I'll hear people say, like, my mother taught me this, or my father taught me that when a man comes in, then this is how he has to treat you, etc. But I haven't heard that. I haven't heard a lot of women or a lot of people say that they were taught, like someone intentionally helped them to find a sense of self. I feel like it seems to be trial and error. And then you have women and men, I guess, get to a point in their lives where they've had so many negative interactions in relationships because of lack of boundaries that they're broken, and now they're unlearning the practice of not having a sense of self, the practice of not having boundaries, and they're just learning what they truly desire and what they're not going to put up with. Has that been your experience in supporting women in this respect, that many of the times they don't come with a sense of self or a strong sense of self?
Definitely. I mean, a lot of the women, they're struggling with either depression or anxiety. And the depression is, I wouldn't say in all cases, but in a good amount of the cases, there's some low self-esteem as well. So if you don't feel good about yourself, you probably will be more likely to allow some harmful things in, whether it's people, or any kind of bad habit. It doesn't have to be, a person. It could be developing, some sort of dependency or addiction to something. So yes, some people don't have, and I would say a lot of us, we weren't taught to develop that sense of identity, a positive sense of identity. We struggle in life, and we go through the motions, and we attempt to figure out, well, who am I? What do I want? Where do I fit in? Where do I belong? Even just thinking about adolescence, so much of, being a young person is kind of figuring out, who am I? What's my identity? Where do I belong? What type of person do I want to be with? So that's just a natural part of life, just developing as a person. But there are some, lucky people who had that training that, their parents instilled in them that, look, this is who you are. These are your strengths. You're great because of X, Y, and Z. So of course, there are people in the world where confidence is not their struggle. They might have the other struggle of, okay, I got to bring down the pride a little bit because I love myself very much. But a lot of us, we have to go through the process and kind of figure out as we go along, how do I want to be defined? Someone is defining me as this, but how do I want to be defined? So I think that's, definitely, a good part of the process for a lot of people. But, these are generalizations. There's no real cookie cutter for everyone. Everyone's experience is different, but we have some similarities, that are across the board.
I love that question. How do I want to be defined? What a great place to start if you are looking to set boundaries, right? To just ask yourself that question. Who am I? How do I want to be defined? I love that. So, can we and do we need to set boundaries with ourselves?
Oh, definitely. I think so. I think that because there are so many things available to us, we have to decide, do I want this? Is it good for me? And I think, if you're thinking about food, everything is available, but not everything is going to be beneficial for your body, whether it's the type or the amount of food, relationships as well. Not everything is going to be healthy for us. Even, the things that we entertain, what are we watching? What are we listening to? We have to be careful what we let into our system. I think especially in our mind, because our mind controls.
Frozen.
Oh, I thought that was me.
No.
I think she's frozen. So we're going to let her come back in. Wow, this is such a great, I'm loving the flow, of this discussion. I mean, setting boundaries. Who knew that it had all of these different layers? I mean, that one right there just blew my mind, Q. The whole, how do I want to be defined? Oh my gosh, I could sit with that question in meditation and really, get some really good I want to say insight from that.
Right.
Welcome back.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is the ongoing interview here.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next question. You guys can always connect with Dr. Rahman on her Instagram if you want to talk further with her. As you can tell, she's definitely well versed and educated on these topics and really already helping us to uncover some of these layers. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got my notebook here. So anyway, our next question is, what are some of the difficulties in your experience? And I think we kind of touched on this a little bit though, right? In your experience about that people have when they're trying to set boundaries.
Definitely. So some of what we mentioned, the difficulty saying no, people pleasing, the fear, whether it's fear of rejection, fear of conflict, poor self-esteem, so they don't believe that they're worth anything better, whether it's, relationship. You can even think about, in the work setting, just being afraid to say, no, I can't take on more because of, you're afraid literally to lose your job or to fall out of good grace with your, employer. I think self-esteem as well would impact on someone being able to express their true feelings. So they might pretend, yes, I'm okay with this, but they know that, no, I really am not okay with this. It's not making me feel good. And then I think as well, lack of follow through. So sometimes we set a boundary, but we get reeled back in, right? Someone who's really good at manipulating, they make you feel guilty. And then you're just afraid to follow through. You're like, oh, well, they really need my help. They need me right now. Or they're going to be really disappointed. Let me go ahead and do, whatever it is that they're asking of me. So I think those are some things that, it makes it difficult to not only say something, but to follow through and implement what it is that you're thinking that you need for yourself.
For sure. That follow through point is so important right there. You said that being reeled back in. This takes practice, guys. This work takes practice. And that's why having a professional, working with you can be very helpful with this whole process, because you need a safe space to
Yeah.
practice. Because
Yes.
all if we're not doing something that is necessary for our well-being, it's most likely because we're out of practice, and so we can practice and get better at it. And that's the beauty of all of this. But like you were saying, in the beginning, that self-awareness is at the forefront of all of this. Just first becoming self-aware of where you need to improve upon, and then taking action, connecting with someone, and then practicing. We can do it even if we haven't done it before. Everybody's a pioneer, on something at some point in time. So our last question for today what are some tips that you can offer to help people overcome the difficulty associated with setting boundaries?
Great. So I'm thinking of why, what, how, and then commit. So 4 steps. So the why is you want to reflect on why do I want a boundary, or why do I need to set a boundary? So for some people, it becomes clearer because they've been hurt, they've been taken advantage of, they feel burnt out. And so they're angry and they're frustrated, and now they're beginning to recognize there's a problem here. So I would say to think of and take this time of reflection on the why, because we need the motivation. That's going to help us when we feel like, no, this is too much work. I don't want to do all of what's going to be entailed. So we need to connect with the why. Secondly, I think of the what. What are the boundaries that need to be created? So we need reflection, and you can reflect, journal on the why, and just kind of be quiet and just kind of how would I put it, take stock of what has been going on, what has been working, what hasn't been working, and consider what can I handle, what can't I handle, what is it that I need, what are my values, what do I want moving forward. The how relates to creating a plan. How am I going to actually make this boundary? I've thought about why I need to do it. I've thought specifically about what type of boundary. Now, how do I get this moving? And I think being specific is going to be helpful. Just like any goal, if it's too broad, it's not very attainable. So we have to break it down. And I think part of that is preparing for and anticipating what am I going to do, when challenges come up, when I'm triggered in some sort of way that it might take me off course. What am I going to do? How am I going to handle, okay, here comes this person and here's their technique to manipulate me and make me feel guilty. What am I going to do? So I think anticipating those situations can be very helpful, because although we would like to imagine it's going to be smooth sailing, that's not always that straightforward. So once you have your plan, I think the last step is commit. So you have your why, you're in touch with your motivation, you know what you need to do, you've come up with a plan. Now it's the actual hard work of committing that this is what I said that I need to do, and I'm going to stick to it. I can't work past X hours. I can't go here, anymore. Whatever it is, I have to follow through with what it is that I say I want for myself or I need for myself.
Awesome. This has been so good and so helpful for us in general. And I know the community is really going to benefit from some of these techniques that you shared with us today. Some of the things that really stood out for me, once again, like I said, was that main question in the beginning: how do I want to be defined? Just becoming more self-aware, partnering up with a professional or someone who can hold you accountable and hold space for you to unpack some of these things, using the tools that Dr. Fazita just talked about, the notebook, specifically, and asking those questions that she shared with us. I think just the repetition of doing that. And like you said at the very beginning, self-care mastery, we use the term very loosely. It's not about perfectionism. It is about consistency. It is about, showing up for yourself every day and then doing the work, committing to doing the work for yourself. That's what the mastery is all about. It's that I am going to do this no matter what. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Check out Dr. Fazita Rahman on her Instagram page. She has the Vibrant Woman Wellness Counseling, and it's phenomenal. She's doing some great work there. I saw some of the sessions and workshops that she has going on, and so some really good tools to help add value to your quality of life. So thanks again for showing up for the Q&A exchange, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Hey, great. Thank you.
Thanks again.
Dr. Rahman has several events coming up this month and the following months going forward. So feel free to check her out on her Instagram page, which is Vibrant Woman NYC, for a list of upcoming events. Also, you can check out her events page on her website, which is vibrantwoman.me/upcoming-events. If you're looking to purchase sea moss in its various forms, visit One Peaceful Yogi on Instagram, and you can learn more about the benefits of sea moss on her Instagram page as well. Self-love, being in love with every part of yourself, taking care of your own needs and not sacrificing your well-being to please others, not settling for less than you deserve.